Hey, this is Wesley Fryer with Moving at the Speed of Creativity, and I wanted to just post a couple thoughts via YouTube because these are some ideas that have been on my mind lately, and I'm also just wanting to experiment more with YouTube as a publishing environment. The thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is educational reform and what I would consider to be two of the elephants in the room when it comes to discussion about education, specifically in the United States. And one of the things that people are not talking about a lot when they talk about school performance and academic achievement and whether schools are succeeding or failing in their role to serve students and serve society is the issue of poverty. And I have blogged about this before. David Berliner, Dr. David Berliner, who is at the University of Arizona, is one of several different folks who have written extensively and researched about the correlation between poverty and test scores. And when you do quantitative analysis on test scores in the United States, and you will just take out not even actually socioeconomic groups, but just if you look at white Caucasian students, and then you compare that subgroup against folks in Sweden, folks, Scandinavian countries that we see being high scoring in different tests of literacy, students in East Asia, different places, that student subpopulation is doing quite well. And we have a very diverse society in the United States. We have a large segment of the population living below the poverty level. And we simply don't have many politicians who are usually condemning education and educators, mentioning the fact that educators have an incredibly challenging task working with a very diverse student population. So I think poverty is one of the elephants in the room. And the other elephant in the room, and I've been having some discussions here lately, even just this week about this topic, is the issue of adequacy. What is an adequate education in the 21st century? When I took my educational law classes at Texas Tech University here a couple years ago, I was really interested to learn that the issue of educational adequacy was at the heart of discussions about school finance reform and the lawsuits that have continued, for years and years in the courts over equity issues for education and funding. And if you're not familiar with this, we have a very inequitable system in the United States generally for funding education because most of our educational funds come from property taxes, which are inherently inequitable. You have some regions that have very, relatively lower property values and others that have higher property values. Therefore, the schools with the higher property values and the higher tax base have a lot more money to work with when they're educating their students. So I just really think these two issues need to be discussed when it comes to educational reform, not ignored. The issue of poverty and the challenges that we have educating a population that is very diverse, not just culturally, but also socioeconomically. And also the issue of adequacy. What does it mean to have an adequate education in the 21st century? I think that definition should be very different than what it meant, let's say, in the 1950s. But I think a lot of the folks contributing perhaps the loudest to the discussion about educational reform are clamoring for, let's go back to basics, let's read and write and do math skills, and they're not thinking about digital literacy. They're not thinking about this broad set of what we might consider 21st century learning skills that encompass so much more than just the basics of education. And I am firmly convinced that in this country and elsewhere in this nation, we simply cannot settle for an educational system that is only going to provide the basics. We have got to celebrate and promote and support the arts, creativity in education. We have to stop believing the myth that one educational pathway is appropriate for everyone. There are all kinds of learners. There are all kinds of learning styles and people. We are all unique individuals. And it is ridiculous, ludicrous, and I don't know what other adjectives I can use to describe it, silly to think that we need to somehow have a factory model of education where everyone is being provided with a consistent experience, irrespective of the baggage, the issues, the interests that they bring to the classroom. So if you have any thoughts or comments about this topic, I would invite you to comment here on this YouTube post, and you can also respond with your own video. And school reform is a big issue. It's something that, touches my heart deeply as an educator, as a parent, and as a citizen of the United States of America. And I'm just hopeful that we'll have folks continue to thoughtfully approach this issue, to, not rush to generalizations, sweeping generalizations that really, I think, hurt the cause of teaching and learning when we are basically ignoring elephants in the room, and certainly two of those are poverty and the issue of adequacy in education.